We're good to start. Morning, everyone. You're very welcome to our webinar. I imagine everybody's the same as ourselves and working from home, and hopefully, more importantly, all keeping safe. So let's get started. I'm Roger Gribbin from Acorn IT, and this morning I'm joined in the webinar by Steve Jemmott, who's Sales Manager from Sicon. And we'll hear a little bit more of Sicon in a second. For those of you who don't know us, we're an accredited Sage implementation and development partner. It's our 17th year in business, and whilst we've won a number of Sage awards over that time, last month we've been awarded the Sage 200 Partner of the Year and the prestigious overall Sage Partner of the Year for Ireland. So two accolades we're very proud of. We're accredited across a range of Sage software, Sage 50, Sage 200, CRM, and we do this from two offices in Kilrea and Derry and in Santry in North Dublin. Overall, we look after about 400 customers using Sage 50 and Sage 200. So we'll just move on to the next slide, a little bit of an intro on Sicon. Sicon are one of our partners. They've been developing software for Sage 200 for about 20 years. They were an implementation partner just like us, and a number of years ago took the decision to stop implementing and only focus on developing their own solutions, which are now only sold and implemented through partners like ourselves. So I know the writing's very small. This screen gives you an idea of the modules that exist, and Steve will cover some of them shortly, ranging from the barcoding, the warehousing, manufacturing, which is the purpose of today, but for other areas, for businesses that don't just be interested in the manufacturing area, such as cash flow and intercompany modules, a whole host of stuff. But we'll cover through some of it. This is more just to give a very high level overview. So with the welcome and introductions done at this stage, I want to give you an overview of what we're going to cover in the 45 or 50 minutes today, depending on how things go and whether there's any questions. I wanted to share with you what we're finding out from our customers and clients that we're engaging with. I'm combining that with the research that Sage are carrying out, what those key challenges are that organizations are facing within their current business climate. When I'm going out to meet people, the first question they'll normally sort of put to us is, well, where have you covered this before, or how are other companies dealing with it? In some companies, we're maybe dealing with the MD or the business owner. In others, we're maybe dealing with the IT team or a business operational manager. So we'll cover how this impacts those different roles in their view of the world. And I'm going to cover briefly then where Sage 200 fits and how, together with those Sicon modules for Sage 200, those issues are addressed. At that stage, then we'll pass over to Steve, who'll pick it all up. As I should have added, we've muted everyone for this conversation for today's session. So feel free to add any questions as we go, and we can cover those at the end if we have time, or indeed organize an individual chat or pick up a dialogue with somebody individually. So there are a number of key issues that we encounter, say, when we engage with a business, largely grouped into 5 sort of key themes. Firstly, complexity. The business may have changed with maybe more people, more complex processes, more locations, and the existing systems that worked well for a business of a particular shape or size just don't work anymore. Just announced this morning, Mr. Dyson is making 10,000 ventilators from a concept that was started literally over the last few weeks. So whilst they wouldn't have time to implement an ERP system in between that, but agility is everything in their case. Our second point is inefficiency. With the associated growing pains of an organization, the business may have manual processes or duplication of effort, perhaps manual rekeying of information or spreadsheets being used as a processing tool. Thirdly, kind of key area, lack of visibility, people struggling to get information and key business metrics out in a timely fashion to support their decision making. Still one of the most important areas that we're uncovering. As I say, some, believe it or not, are still manually collating information either in Excel or on paper. The fourth point, finding and keeping customers, still a challenge for some. So whether it's supporting new customer acquisitions or strategies or customer retention through a great customer service experience. Finally, compliance. With some, it's not. It's just a necessary evil to keep up with the changing regulations, whether that be data protection or tax legislation. It's still a challenge that we're finding people are encountering. So breaking this into the 4 key roles or personas, as we call them, that we meet, people have slightly different priorities. I suppose, first of all, managing directors or a business owner, they're likely to be interested in everything and information to help drive business growth or growth of the bottom line. Cost reductions normally something close to their heart. Similarly, with finance or head of finance, they're interested in what's going on within the business both from a financial perspective and of course that compliance bit we talked on earlier. IT generally interested in availability and security, perhaps ease of reporting, as they're generally the ones that are asked to provide the information and get information out of the system and extract it. And then the operational people, should it be production or different areas of operations, they're more concerned with productivity, less waste, logistics, supply chain management for goods coming in and out of the business. So next, just wanted to cover off a one piece. This is a Sage 200 and the manufacturing solutions. So it's Sage solution of choice for mid-sized businesses, typically those between 20 and 200 employees. The system is modular, as you see by the little diagram there. You only need to buy and implement the modules that you need. That's the key piece. About 50% of the people that are using Sage 200 have come from Sage 50. So it's a natural progression or a natural step for that to develop. So again, yes, system starts with financial modules as detailed. Most will then have commercials, which again are detailed on screen, and then other modules are added individually as required. But I think the key bit is from that, people are only adding the modules and paying for the modules that they're using. So I just wanted to set the scene with Sage 200, and I'm going to pass across to Steve, who's going to be taking you across the demonstration. As I say, this is specifically around the manufacturing options within Sicon. So I'll pass across over to you, Steve.
That's great. Thank you, Roger. So as we were talking about there with the Sage 200, the Sicon elements, and we're part of a wider ecosystem of developer or ISVs, as Sage call them, creating add-ons for the Sage 200. And it's very much building on top of that core finance element. Now, in terms of the market, we've seen a shift certainly over the last few years. Historically, Sage was just seen as, it's finance, and customers would be using disparate systems. It could be spreadsheets, it could be third-party solutions. What's changed now is, to touch on some of those key points as Roger was going there, it's very much bringing everything through so you've got one version of the truth. And hopefully today's overview of just some of the key elements is going to be quite quick, just to keep things snappy. And of course we can sort of do a one-to-one if there's further interest, and every project is different, but hopefully give you an idea of using technology, how we can have that one version of the truth. Now, we tend to break it down into static data, your process, and then visibility. So your static data would be sort of one version of the truth of your stock levels, bill of materials. So if you're the type of manufacturer who is taking that standard recipe and repeating it, or taking that recipe but then tweaking some of the components to fit a customer, but providing you accuracy of stock levels, cost control, and we can see reordering levels as well. As we move through into the process then, that's going to be things such as material planning. So looking at that single database view, what we call future stock movements, and when should you order, what's the system pushing to you, what warnings there may be that stock won't arrive in time, when should we place our purchase orders, but also enabling the user to generate those purchase orders en masse as opposed to typing them individually. Using technology to goods receipts, or barcoding and warehousing. So rather than the items coming into the warehouse, being ticked up on a piece of paper, put into the in tray, and eventually that's then updated in Sage. So there's always a lag between what your stock levels are and what the system's seeing, using that technology to update both at the same time, not only reducing administration work and time, but also again increasing the accuracy. And then finally the works orders, which is where the demonstration today will start. So taking that snapshot of your bill of materials, giving you costing and being able to allocate, issue, so take those components and then close and book the finished item in ready for dispatch. And then the final element is capacity or visibility. So things such as capacity planning. So we've got a rough cut capacity planning tool that you'll see shortly. So based on what labour resource we've got and the workload, are we overloaded, etc. And then finally dashboards. So it's absolutely pointless putting information into a system if you can't get it out. And again, the idea of joining all of these elements together into a single view is giving you that single view of the truth as opposed to have to report across multiple spreadsheets. So let's start with a static. So this would be a stock record, Sage 200 stock record. Some of the key elements will be the costing method. So is it first in, first out? Is it standard, average, actual costing if you're using batch traceability? Then multiple suppliers against the stock record. And for each of those suppliers, what's the lead time typically for getting that stock in? Is there a usual order quantity? So we have to order in multiples of 12 in this example. And have we got supplier price lists? So do we have a catalogue list price? Or again, just to give us a bit of a guidance, use the last buying price. Now, we can also, whilst you can have multiple suppliers against a stock record, you'll also have one that's preferred, which material planning is going to utilize. And then the final element within here, and again, there's a lot of other details that we can hold, but sort of the key areas are the locations. So within Sage 200, we can have multiple warehouse locations. They could be physical, they could be virtual. So some customers will have quarantine warehouses, for example. Other times it's actual sites, but being able to then see what is the stocking level at each of those locations. From a reorder perspective, what's the minimum we want to hold? So if it's set to 0, are we going to buy to order? Or actually, because it's a faster moving component, do we need to stock that to a minimum level? And then in each of those warehouse locations, your bins. So the racking, what's the routing through the warehouse? So we know what stock we've got. We can prioritize. So the bin definitions on the right-hand side there, we can prioritize what's our pick phase bin, our overflow, our bulk stock. So again, we're guiding the users around the warehouse as they're picking the components or picking the finished items to improve efficiencies. The next level up then would be your bill of materials. So in this instance here, to manufacture this particular item, so to make one of those, we can then see the components or the raw materials that we require in the quantity. Now, again, you can have phantoms, you can have sub-assemblies within there, so multiple levels, but giving us an idea of what raw materials we're going to require. But also, again, coming back to this suggestion for material planning, if we haven't got those stocking levels, what's the demand and when do we need to get those in by? We've then also got operations. So what's the routing through? So from a machine and labor tracking perspective. So what are the various operations and the steps and how long do they take to make one? So if we're making 1,000, of course, it's going to multiply that up. Is it fixed length machine setup? Is it variable length? But also then, as we'll see shortly, utilizing technology to enable the production floor to clock on and clock off of those operations. So tracking real time, but also giving us visibility of where we are on each of those works orders. And then finally, based on that information, giving us an idea of the current costing. So based on that, the current sort of average price of those raw materials, the labour and the estimated hourly rates for those, to give us an idea of what the typical cost will be. Now, as we move through into the works orders, we're going to then start to see actual costing, but providing us with, are we pitching the sales price in the correct way? So let's move on to the process. And in terms of inside of Sage 200 and how this looks, so we've got our process works orders screen here, and there's a series of sub-assemblies below the top level. So if we go into that crown A that we saw as part of the bill of materials earlier, and when this loads up, because we've generated it off the back of the bill of materials, we can then see the components that have been pulled through, the quantity that we still require. We haven't allocated, we haven't actually got any free stock at the moment. So if I right mouse click and go down to the future stock movements, I can then see the demand. Our current free stock is 0. So the system's going to need us to purchase some stock so we can carry on processing this. The operations that we spoke about earlier have been pulled through into the sequence, the quantity we need to make at each level, but then also the timings based on starting and finishing and the multipliers. And then we can see in here then the labor transactions. Now, from an operations perspective, we can produce route cards, and those with unique barcodes on. And we now move across to one of the first bits of technology, which is an Android app running on an Android device, but connected real time to Sage. So not only can I log in and tell them that I'm in the building, I can then scan the works order to go direct to it, or from the list, I can find the particular works order that I need to be working on. We see the various different operations, click on start, and now I'm ready to go. And that's updating real time. Some customers who need to subcontract, so being able to generate a purchase order for that subcontract, but add the components or the finished items that we're going to be sending out to them to manufacture and generate the purchase order. And we can then dispatch and receive those back to track them. And all of this is rolling up then based on all that costing into an estimate, but then an actual cost as well. We've also built into the system the concept of pre-allocation. So we know that this particular works order is pre-allocated to the next level. So when we book this in, it's then going to book in to that next level. So on to material planning that we spoke about. So once that's run, first things first, we can see some warnings. Now, a lot of this will be because data's in the past here, but it's telling us there's the suggestion, but all of those works orders, because we can't get the stock in time, we obviously need to do something about. It can suggest works orders. So this could be from a forecast that we've entered, the quantity that we need to order, and the reason why. Is it for a particular sales order, or is it just to bring back to the minimum level? And then our suggested purchase orders. And if we filter here for one of our warehouses, we can now see the items that we're looking to or being suggested to buy in. And we've got the raw materials. And again, if I double click on there, we can see the reason why we need to buy in for to bring us back to our minimum stock level of 0 in order to fulfill those 4 works orders. It tells us the purchase order creation date, the quantity that we need to buy in, our suppliers, the price. We can change supplier. So if you could get it from a local hardware store, for example, I'm not suggesting you could, you could select those. As we tick them, they've highlighted green. So now we can generate our purchase orders and not have to sit and manually type them in. I can accept those pre-allocations, so the system knows that when a good's received, they're going to allocate to the appropriate works order, and that's now generated me 2 purchase orders. And if I look inside of Sage's purchase order processing, we can see those POs. Now, I could receive them manually inside of Sage, but again, we can start to utilize technology. But just before we do that, we can also see the reason why the system has generated those purchase orders for those particular works orders. So barcoding warehousing, another Android app connected real time to Sage, enabling the production floor to find the purchase order, see the items on there, scan them if there's barcodes, or manually type the figures in. They can print labels if necessary, and I can confirm goods receipt. Enter the delivery note number, which Sage requires. When I receive those in, that's now updated our stock. We've got the second purchase order, which we require for our production today, so we can receive those items in. We could over receipt, we could under receipt. Again, it all depends on the various different settings. But the most important piece here is back inside of Sage, as we view this, without anybody having to do anything in the middle, because we've used this technology, it's now updated Sage. So our stock levels are live in Sage as we receive them in. And we can see then on the works order, we've got the correct stock, and I can now allocate. Now, what allocation does is that ring fences that stock, so our free stock goes down, updates the status, it's ring fenced. And because I'm still clocked in on the shop floor, we can see what operation this person's working on. As I log in, I can go straight to that particular order. I can see how long I've been working on it. And if I stop, I could pause it and say, perhaps I'm going for lunch, and then tell it how many I've made, or I could fully complete it. That's going to stop the clock. And it's then also going to update real time the works order, so we can see actually how much time and how much it's cost based on that employee's cost rate, but also where we are with regards to the works order. So the next stage is issuing the stock, and I could do this again through the barcoding. So you could issue the components on the handheld. That's now taking those raw materials out of stock, so down dating the stock, and it's putting the cost into WIP, and we now start to get an actual cost. And what we have in the background will be your original budgeted cost and your actual. So again, if the cost of components was different and we wanted to work out why, we can see that, or if labour. And then the final element is being able to book in the finished product. So as we click on book, we could book in more or less, again, dependent on scrappage, for example, but I'm going to finish this works order. That, because of the pre-allocation, is now going to book it to the next level up. And that's that works order completed. And if we go back to our summary screen, we can now see that's completed. And you can see part allocated in the next level up. And if we just drill down to that particular works order, we can then see it's pre-allocated already. So it knows that that particular one was for that level. So again, a bit of a whistle-stop tour there in terms of the process from start to finish. The elements that we've spoken about are, so Sage 200, giving you the raw, well, that's static data as mentioned. So your suppliers, your bill of materials and your stock levels. The works order processing, material planning, which is taking that and then pushing to us what we need to order in time, controlling the down dating of the stock, what stock we require in issuing, and the costing elements. We saw the shop floor data capture app, so using what we call a web API technology, so connecting to Sage, but just using modern day technology to then enable the production floor to clock on and clock off those operations, doing two things: giving us visibility, as we'll see a little bit later, of where we are in those works orders, but also capturing actual time, so being able to compare that, what we've estimated, and when we've been working out what the sales price, and actually how long it is taking us as well. And then the final bit was the barcoding and warehousing. So we saw the goods receipt, but you can do other things on there, which is from stock taking, moving stock around your warehouse, adding stock, writing stock off, moving stock between warehouse locations, and then picking and dispatching your sales orders, as well as we mentioned, you could pick and issue on the handheld from the production floor to the works order via that as well. So then moving on to the next level, which then is our visibility. So we move then on to capacity planning, or rough cut capacity planning. And if we just play this is again sitting inside of Sage 200 and giving us visibility based on what we've told the system our labour availability is, machine availability, and an actual demand. So first things first, being able to see just at a high level, are we over demand on any of these? What's our work schedule? So being able to see what's due this week, what's overdue, and if there is overdue, what's the workload? What is overdue in there? How long is that going to take us? What's the status? Now, most important really is, are we overloaded on any of those operations? So we can see here our plumber is overloaded. So first things first, we need to have a look at that. So we can now drill down to that particular resource, and then if we refresh and run this, we can see, well, actually, we haven't got any availability at all on that particular day, so none of the plumbers work. So I could drill down and edit the works orders, but it's giving us and telling us the particular works orders that relates to. Now, if we go to the top and we look at our plumbing teams, we can then see what work they're being scheduled for, and we can do that across the various different teams in the system, and you start to see visibility. But the most important bit is, as we move items around within here, it's actually updating the works order real time. So it's not updating and then have to go back into the works order and update. It's going to enable us to do that concurrently. If we have a look at the works orders that we're working on, again, we can then see visibility of those particular works orders, and just at a high level, the particular ones that we're going to be working. And if you drag and move that particular works order, again, that's going to update the start and finish dates. And then finally, we get to the operations. So we saw the operations, I clocked onto those earlier. So with a bit of color coding, seeing the sequencing, even being able to drill down to 15-minute time frames with that, and being able to move down to 15 minutes if we need to, that granular level. Now, there's a couple of key bits here as well. So if we move an operation, and it can't begin at that time because of it could be a weekend, so it's non-working time, or perhaps you might get messages where we're overloaded, or if there are elements that follow that, it's going to move the subsequent. So if you've got machine start time, for example, and then you've got the labor resource. Well, of course, you could set the machine up and do the labor the next day, but you can't do the labor without the machine being set up. So again, giving us that visibility of all of that at this stage. So starting to push that information to you. But there's the other side of the visibility was, we mentioned sort of dashboards, but just before that, so again, if you remember when we got to the shop floor data capture, it asked us to clock into the building. So then being able to see who's clocked in. But because you've got the various different locations, being able to see who's in which location and clocked in, what their start time was as well. And then we move on to dashboards. So there's no bespoke development here. We've been granted permission from a customer of ours who uses the works orders and the barcoding. This is what they've developed, or their in-house team have developed themselves. We've told them where the databases are. The business partners told them the same, and giving them, but they're just pulling all from the same database, the information. So visibility, what they wanted to see were works orders where there's stock shortages, the quantity of the finished items, for example, as well as a list of the finished items with free stock. So that's how they wanted that information displayed. And this really is the bespoke element of any project, so long as the data's in the database in a logical fashion. And what I mean by that is you're not trying to report on purchase orders by sales ledger account, for example. Again, being able to present that. Now, it could be, I know Roger and the team at Acorn are experts with regards to a multitude of options for reporting. So again, you can lean on them. But if you have got in-house skills, again, we're always happy to tell you where these tables are. From a barcoding perspective, what was really key for them was having visibility of what the average for a Thursday is, what we need to pick, dispatch, what we actually dispatched so far, and the percentage through. They've actually, this is using Power BI, connected direct into Sage, with notifications if they fall, if it's lunchtime and they're not at a certain point. So perhaps we need to get the sales team down to the warehouse to help. And then quite unique to these guys, but it's an excellent concept in my opinion, is whilst typically sales people, we're target driven. So, if you put a chart on the wall of who's in first place, of course, everybody wants to be in first place. But what they've done is they've set up a system whereby there's a team bonus, a weekly team bonus for the warehouse staff, so long as they hit those KPIs, with penalties, of course, if the quality is not there, individuals losing it. So this is on a screen in the corner of the room, and nobody wants to be bottom. And what this done is they're actually self-policing themselves, because if somebody's not pulling their weight, then of course they're pushing each other because it's affecting them. So this has had a number of different benefits for them. The first one is having visibility in the corner of the screen of where they are, having visibility for the management team of those analytics as well, real time, but also changing the culture in the warehouse. I'm not suggesting everybody does that, and it might not work in every environment, but again, it's just an insight into how different customers are utilizing this and pushing this information. So from my perspective, that's very much what I wanted to show today. And I'm going to hand back over to Roger, who's going to talk about a mutual customer. And over to you, Roger.
Yep, very good. I couldn't forget where the unmute button was. That was my delay. So yeah, listen, thanks very much, Steve. And I think the key from that, being able to have those, a lot of cases people call the dashboards, the final pieces, the icing on the cake. And really what they do is they support good, structured, solid processes across the organization. And I'll always say, if you get to the stage, if you can put it on a screen, on a BI, should it be Power BI or a dashboard, ultimately that means that your processes are structured, and they are in that position of being able to report on them. So yeah, so one of the recent companies that has implemented Sage 200, which has a lot of the modules that we've seen there this morning, is Multihog, company based in Dundalk, manufacture, I suppose, the little utility vehicles that you've seen around cities, and probably more importantly around airports. So it's effectively four key vehicles, four key platforms, and on the basis of that, they'll add on a whole host of different attachments. So the idea behind it is you buy one vehicle, so for an airport, say, and it could be de-icing or brushing snow at one part of the year, or used to cut grass or blow leaves at another time. So that's the background to that. They were using Sage 50 with some of the manufacturing functionality, and just found out that it wasn't really supporting the business as it was expanding and needing to grow. So, should it be all of the products are, whilst they will have standard products, each of them is effectively configured and built to order. So from that point of view, or from their point of view, demand was key. Understanding what raw material needed to be ordered in and when, and hence the material planning being key into weekly and monthly buckets. Whenever those purchase orders were generated, someone had an option to be able to validate and confirm and say, yes, from that perspective, happy for the purchase order to be processed. And ultimately, whenever it was raised and the goods were being received into stock, they were receipted on a handheld. So the system was directing them at that stage to say, yeah, we've ordered 17 of them, we've received 17, and instructing them of where to put them away. So ultimately, whenever it comes to should it be a works order pick list or a sales pick list for the spare parts, that someone could do that on handheld and would guide them through to the relevant location. So they knew where everything was inside the factory. So yeah, from that point of view, that was really all I wanted to chat around. I understand, we have a lot of people on this webinar this morning. It's hopefully given you an idea or a flavour in terms of the capability and the functionality behind it all, and I suppose how that can help you in your own organisation. So I hope you found the session useful. Would love to have a discussion with you all individually. I know there's 40 odd plus people on the line, so please do drop us a quick reply. We'll be sending out some feedback. So whether it's something that you'd like to pick up and investigate further, and from that, we'll be happy to pick up. So any particular questions? There is nothing on the chat, so I suggest from that we will pick up all the dialogue individually. And
Roger, the only question that springs to mind is from your perspective, a question that comes up quite a lot is, what does a typical project, what should be some of the considerations that customers, if they're looking at this going, well, actually, we'd like to get to that end goal. What would be your advice of some of the considerations that they'd, what's that journey look like?
I think that's key, is that it's a journey, and that, I suppose gone are the days where people, I don't know who it was coined the phrase that it is very much a journey, and you need to plot out where the destination needs to be. But I think the key piece of advice would be, don't as long as we're on the same journey, that you need not necessarily get to the end destination or look to do that as a step one. So I suppose more and more we're looking at in terms of phasing projects. So people will say, right, well, we'll get to, and I suppose that's where we come into play. From our point of view, recognizing and being mindful of the fact that we do this a lot more often than you guys will do this. So from that regard, we'll sit down, have a chat with you, use the experience we've gained in all of our implementations down through the years, so that we're happy to have a conversation and say, well, actually, have you considered it this way or that way? Or if there are particular strong views on how a system should be implemented, we're happy to sit and work those through with you. But I think the key bit is that you don't have to get there day one, and as long as there's a plan and how we do that together, that allows everybody to get whatever you need at various stages. That would probably be a key bit of advice. So nothing more on the chat. All I want to do is just basically thank everyone for attending. As I say, we'll be in touch by email, and we'll pick up the individuals' dialogues with you from there. So thanks very much, everyone.